Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video, and I've teased it a lot, you've been waiting, people have asked for it. Now we're going to be doing the politics of other countries, and we're starting off with Canada, the neighbor to the United States to the north. And so this format isn't, like set in stone. Like, I could add certain things to this, I could take away certain topics we discuss. It's all up to you. What do you think I should speak about when I talk about the politics of other countries? What do you think do you think there are certain things that I'm talking about that really shouldn't be covered? Uh, Tell me what you think down in the comments. Help me out to make this series better. So what will be covered in today's video, we'll be talking about the brief history of Canada, the political culture, government organization, as well as the political parties of Canada. Starting off with a brief history, Canadian independence, typically viewed as July 1st, 1867, Canada, under British rule, expanded trade networks and built an economy through agriculture and their natural resources, which was a plethora at the time, technically still is. England did, however, find trouble in financing and governing the Canadian colonies, which they proceeded to give these colonies, now provinces, the right to act as its own country with its own laws and its own parliament. There was also a movement led by John A. Macdonald, if I'm not mistaken. In 1931, England gave Canada a full legal stand and an equal footing with them as a country. However, true independence for Canada really didn't come until 1982, when Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau adopted the Canadian Constitution to limit Britain's influence over the country. And yes, that is Queen Elizabeth right there in that photo. She's been around for a long time. Rest in peace. Now, becoming a major power within the world, nationalism, especially left-wing nationalism, began during the war period throughout the world through 1914-1945. Nationalism spread in Canada, giving them a sense of, hey, we are the best country in the fucking world. There's a thing no one else can do about it. They were essentially recognized as a major power through their involvement in both World War I and World War II. This is when they essentially, people started looking at Canada as like, oh, they're actually a big deal. We should pay attention to them. This gave Canada their own sense of identity instead of just England's child, which Canada really needed at the time, since, they would eventually turn into the, hey, we're Canadians, we're nice, eh? That stereotype. Prime Minister Robert Borden did demand a seat at the Paris Peace Conference, which was rejected by only Britain and the United States for some reason. I personally don't know why, and I couldn't find a reason as to why either. The Great Depression, of course, a global economic disaster. Canada's gross national product dropped by 40%. The unemployment rate was at 27%, Canadian exports shrank by 50%, and wholesale prices dropped by 30%. This was bad, but really not as bad as the United States, who saw much worse numbers than this. And of course, we also have to talk about Quebec Nationalism, also known as the Quiet Revolution. The Quebecois nationalists replaced the establishment in Quebec and demanded independence from Canada. This led to the October Crisis riots, which was pretty much a bunch of Quebec nationalists tearing down the city for some buttfuck reason. However, this was quelled by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau through the emergency powers, using the Canadian military to take down the riots. Okay, now let's talk about the political culture of Canada. We have the basics. You have a mix of Greater North America and British culture. So it's, mix of what you would see here in the United States, as well as what you would see over there in the United Kingdom. There is an emphasis on constitutional law, which you typically see here in, what would you say, Western countries. There's a establishment of freedom of religion, personal liberty, which, very libertarian for a country like Canada. Regional autonomy, a focus on liberalism. Canada is a very liberal country, and typically far left and far right politics are not prominent in Canada. However, there is a major party there are two major parties you would consider far left in different ways. We'll talk about them here in a second. Now is government organization. First, the House of Commons. There are 338 members of Parliament representing the House of Commons. Members are elected by simple plurality. So you could win 30% of the vote in your riding, and if you win the most votes, despite only winning 30%, you can be elected to Parliament pretty easily. There are 113 Canadians in each riding, give or take. There are clauses that Canada has to go by as well. The senatorial clause: no province will have less ridings than Senate seats. We'll get to that here in a second, about Senate seats and all that. In the grandfather clause, no province should have less ridings than it did in 1985. And this one's really not that big of a problem considering Canada's having a population growth and has been since then. So we shouldn't really see this become a problem unless we see like significant. Excuse me, my phone's going off. Unless we see significant, um, population decrease in Canada. Next up, the Senate. Members of the Senate are appointed by the Prime Minister. They are not directly elected and are not appointed by the provincial legislatures, provincial parliaments either, like it used to be here in the United States where the state legislatures would appoint. No, they are appointed by the Prime Minister. There are 105 members of the Canadian Senate, and they are all subject to a mandatory retirement age of 75 years old. And there are also Senate divisions, 24 senators per division. And as you can see here, these divisions are all colored in different colors. Division 1, or I really don't know which division is which, but we have black, light blue, red, yellow, orange, and lighter blue. I don't know. Unless that lighter blue is just in the same division as the maritime provinces. Next up, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. The Prime Minister is selected through the House of Commons through a simple plurality. The Prime Minister is currently Justin Trudeau of the Liberal Party of Canada. And there are two different types of governments you could see in Canada. First is the majority government. It's when the party in control has a majority of seats, which hasn't been seen since 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And there is also a minority government, which it means the party in control only has a plurality of seats, doesn't have a majority of seats. And there are over 50 cabinet positions, including the Prime Minister. Jesus. And they are consisting of members of Parliament. So if you live in the United States, think about it as chair or committee chair folk in the House of Representatives, since the House is essentially chair is the top job, unless you want leadership. But leadership is essentially cabinet. That's the top job in Parliament, besides Prime Minister, of course. Now let's talk about the political parties. I'm going to be talking about 6 major political parties, even though there's typically only really 5. The 6th political party doesn't have any seats in the Senate or the House of Commons, and I don't think they have anywhere in the provincial legislatures either, provincial parliaments, excuse me, but they are still win enough votes nationwide to the point where they win more of the popular vote than, say, another party that's, has seats. First is the Liberal Party of Canada. The ideology is pretty left-wing. It's not moderate, it's not a center-left party, like a lot of people want to say, and I'll explain why here in a second. And I'm basing this off of the 2021 federal election platform, so bear with me if this has changed. In 2021, the Liberals wanted a requirement of vaccine passports, which, no matter where you were, was super unpopular and typically not something that most people want to do unless you're a liberal, which only liberals supported this. Moderate liberals didn't support it. However, they would still vote for these people, so there you go. The elimination of healthcare wait lists. It's an interesting idea, in my opinion, though I just don't know how they do it. The next one's a very interesting idea. Abandoned home infrastructure, essentially refurbishing all these abandoned homes that haven't had people live in them in decades, refurbish them and have people move in. It's a really good idea. Banning gay conversion therapy, which kind of shocked me because I thought people stopped doing that, but apparently not. Anti-racist legislation. Okay. Increase the number of Afghan refugees. Okay. Diverse Economic Council. Apparently, the Liberal Party of Canada think having a diverse economic council does better for the economy. Okay, that's I don't get that. Expansion of immigration. Canada has pretty open borders as it is, and and the Liberal Party is wanting to expand that. And also funding for a ban on handguns. There are certain provinces inside of Canada who have banned the use of handguns and buying handguns altogether, and the Liberal Party wants federal funding for these provinces who ban handguns. Try to incentivize other provinces to do this so as well. The Conservative Party of Canada, they are a center-right party, even though people will try to paint them as some right-wing party, and they're really not. They're pretty centrist. Again, taking a look at their 2021 election platform, neo-conservative economics, applied-side economics, free trade, increase in military spending, something that, you taken out of the early 1900s from the United States, the direct election of senators, which is weird because the House of Commons and the Senate, the Prime Minister, it's confusing. They also want balanced budget legislation, debt reduction, ban on assisted suicide, and just overall tax reductions. Just basic conservative bullshit. It's just nothing too interesting, except the direct election of senators. That's actually the most interesting on the Conservative Party of Canada's, platform was an amendment for that. That's probably the most interesting thing. Next is the New Democrat Party of Canada. This one's a far left party, but not as far left as another party we'll get to here in a second. This party wants increased social welfare, and if you already don't know, Canada is a welfare state. Essentially, most of their funding goes to welfare programs such as healthcare and housing and all that. They want expansion on LGBT rights, and same-sex marriage is legal all the way through in Canada. Um, Peace through diplomacy. Essentially, they have a ideology that they want world peace, and they want to do it through diplomacy the best they can. They don't want to get involved militarily, but they will. They also want to take strict action against climate change, more so than the Liberal Party does. They want to change the current Canadian capitalist system to a mixed capitalist socialist economy. However, I have not found anything to where any NDP leader or member of parliament has explained how this would be done and what changes would be made. And they also want to expand the public healthcare system. Fun fact, the Bernie Sanders' healthcare legislation is to the left of Canada's healthcare system, because Canada's healthcare system is basic universal healthcare. Doesn't include things like dental or eyeglasses. Just, hey, you can go to the doctor and you can see them free of charge, and quite a few other things. Next up is the Bloc Quebecois Party of Canada. This is a left-wing party, a nationalist party, a Quebec Nationalist Party. And this party, of course, supports Quebec independence, which we spoke about earlier about how nationalistic the Quebec Party, the Quebecers are. They want no restrictions on abortions, which is the status quo already in Canada, so that's already been, fulfilled. They want expanded LGBT rights similar to the NDP. They want the legalization of assisted suicide. Don't know why assisted suicide is that big of an issue. It's a very interesting issue. They also want the abolition of the Canadian Senate, which I agree. The Canadian Senate has no real meaning. Even if you were to do a direct election of senators, it could get to the point where the senators have more power than the prime minister. So you might as well either go to a system where the prime minister is directly elected and you have a proportional representation system for the House of Commons, and then do the direct election of senators where you have a prime minister, potentially a speaker of parliament, and then a Senate majority leader, so on and so forth. They also want a ban on government workers wearing religious symbols. Just want to reiterate, Canada has freedom of religion in the country. Just want to point that out. Next, the Green Party of Canada, a party that's even further to the left of the NDP. And I'm not talking about socialists. This is more paleo-liberal, conspiracy theory type people that go into this party. They support things like nonviolence. I don't know what that means. Social justice policies, redistribution of wealth, criminal justice reform. They also the direct election of the prime minister, which is probably the most thing that this party has on their platform. Everything else is just like very, you know, subtle, just not too direct. It's strange, honestly. I understand why J.J. McCulloch doesn't really like this party. It's a very strange party. And finally, the People's Party of Canada. This party is a right-wing libertarian party. Based off their platform, they have a huge focus on economic populism, such as protectionism and all that. They want a decrease in immigration. I understand tightening borders, but I really don't understand the decrease in immigration. However, this is a really smart thing, and that's the fact that Canada has these restrictions on provinces trading with one another. The People's Party actually supports removing those barriers and letting provinces trade with one another, which would actually be a boost to the Canadian economy. They also have an isolationist approach to foreign policy, similar to the NDP, however, except they don't give a shit about what other countries are doing. And of course, they also support healthcare reform. However, they just want to expand it, but on a province by province basis. So, whichever province needs something, they would incentivize that province to use healthcare expansion through those means. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, this was my first video doing a politics of another country. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. Tell me what I should talk about in another video, what I should not talk about, how I can approach a different approach to these. Tell me down in the comments below. This is the Quebecois saying, peace.